So syntactic islands involve what are called wh-dependencies. So let's see this in action. This kitty right here, let's look at him. He's super cute. He was bought as a present for someone. Okay, great. Lily over here thinks this kitty is pretty. Now suppose you want to ask about this situation. You might want to ask this. Who does Lily think the kitty for is pretty? But you can't. You're hopefully making the frowny face like you see here. Instead, you kind of have to ask about it this way. What does Lily think is pretty and who does she think it's for? Right? But you can't do it this way. And the question is, why not? What's going on here? And one answer is that there's a dependency between the WH word, in this case, who, and where it's understood after for the kitty for who, which we can call the gap. And this dependency is not allowed or strongly dispreferred or unacceptable, whatever kind of terminology you're feeling, but we don't like it in English in general. And one explanation is that this dependency is crossing what is called a syntactic island, some sort of internal structure that you cannot cross. The metaphor is that when you're on an island, there's no way off. There's no bridges for crossing, right? There's nothing. You cannot cross an island. You cannot cross into, cannot cross out of. It's an island. Right? So the idea is that there's some sort of structure here that is an island, you cannot cross it. And so that particular one is called a subject island. And here are a couple other ones. So here is Captain Jack Sparrow. He is somewhat tricksy and he claimed he bought something. What did Jack make the claim that he bought? Can't do that. That turns out to be what's sometimes called a complex MP island. Now we go back to Tricksy Jack. He claimed he bought something. Now Elizabeth wondered if he actually did, because, he claimed it, but who knows, and what it was, right? And so we might want to ask, what did Elizabeth wonder whether Jack bought? But again, something's not good there. We can't do it generally. That's sometimes called a weather island. Going back to Tricksy Jack, he claimed he bought something. Elizabeth, knowing Jack, worried that it was something dangerous, right? Because Jack, right? So what did Elizabeth worry if Jack bought? But can't really do that either, right? So this is sometimes called an adjunct island. And what's important is that it's not just about the length of the dependency, because these are all kind of long, right? And so you might wonder, well, maybe it's just the length of it. And we can see that we can start getting longer dependencies, but we don't have that same reaction. So let's look at one. What did Elizabeth think? Great. What did Elizabeth think Jack said? Now it's starting to get pretty long, right? And you can even do, what did Elizabeth think Jack said Lily saw? And you might start to forget exactly who's doing what, but it doesn't feel bad in the way that these feel bad, okay? And that's the difference. So English adults in general will judge these island crossing dependencies to be far worse than many others, including others that are actually pretty similar, except that they don't cross syntactic islands. So this is the kind of behavior we're looking for. And it turns out that when we focus in on the complex MP island one, what did Jack make the claim that he bought, being an example, English learning children strongly disprefer that one compared to other dependencies, right? So it's a child preference as well. So these judgments and dispreferences are a measurable, observable behavior that can signal the successful acquisition of syntactic island knowledge. Whatever that internal representation might be, this is the behavior that we can observe. So these judgments and dispreferences can serve as a target for successful acquisition. It's an outcome we can look for, we can measure, we can try to generate. Okay. So let's dig into this a little bit, looking first at the adult judgments. So adult knowledge can be measured by acceptability judgments, right? How acceptable do you find something? How much do you like something? So Sprouse and colleagues in 2012 did magnitude estimation judgments, which is basically saying, here is a thing, tell me what number, how much you like it, give me a number, give me a magnitude, right? So it's sort of an open-ended thing that can be scaled. But the idea here is that they had a factorial definition that controlled for two salient properties of island crossing dependencies. So one was the length of the dependency, matrix versus embedded, and the other was the presence or absence of an island structure just in the utterance at all, right? Forget about what's going on with the dependency. Just do you have one at all in the utterance, right? And so you can cross these two factors. And so, for example, for subject island stimuli, you can have a matrix dependency in a non-island structure. Who thinks the necklace is expensive? You can have an embedded dependency with that non-island structure. What does Jack think is expensive? You can go back to a matrix dependency, but now just have the island structure in there later on. Who thinks the necklace for Lily is expensive? And then finally, you can have an embedded dependency in that island structure, and in fact, the dependency is crossing that island structure. Who does Jack think the necklace for is expensive? And that's, the one that makes us twitchy. And you can do this for all of the island types we talked about earlier. So our weather island stimuli, what does the teacher wonder whether Jack stole? For the adjunct island stimuli, what does the teacher worry if Lily forgot? For the complex MP ones, what did the teacher make the claim that Lily forgot, right? You can do it for all of these, right? And then what you're looking for, the behavior, the judgment pattern, is a super additive interaction of these two factors. That is the additional unacceptability that arises when the two factors, that is the length of the dependency, matrix versus embedded, and the presence or absence of an island structure. These two factors, when they're combined, you're looking for additional unacceptability above and beyond the independent contribution of each factor. So let me just kind of show you what that looks like visually. If we have an interaction plot, we're on the x-axis, we're plotting the length, so matrix versus embedded, and on the y-axis we plot the non-island structure versus the island structure. Okay, so let's break this down. Here's an island effect. What we would see is the presence of an island versus no island effect. And at a glance, you might see some patterns, but let's just walk through it, right? So let's start in the upper corner here. You have a matrix dependency in a non-island structure, and you like it this much, great, or you like it this much, whatever it is, doesn't matter. You like it a certain amount. What happens if you just have an island structure in there? Well, it turns out you just like it a little bit less, period. You just don't like having an island structure later on. You like it this much less or that much less. You like it some amount less. That's the impact of having an island structure, that factor. Now, what happens if we go back to our matrix dependency non-island and we look at what happens if you make an embedded dependency? You like it that much less, right? It's the difference between this point and that point, or this point and that point, right? That's the impact of the length factor, right? So what you're looking for is a super additive interaction, right? So if it's just the fact that you have these two factors together, that when you go from a matrix non-island to an embedded with an island, boop, boop, add them together, and that's what you expect, right? Like this. But if you add them together and it's in fact still worse, that's super additive. There is additional unacceptability that is happening right here, right? And that's what we're looking for as our, it's not just about being a long dependency and embedded one. It's not just about having an island structure. There's something else going on, this additional unacceptability. So at a glance, you may have noticed this initially, is that this kind of shows up as non-parallel lines versus parallel lines. So when you have an island effect, as it were, presence of island knowledge, however that form is, you end up with non-parallel lines in this style of interaction plot. So that, at a glance, is the kind of thing we're looking for. And so what Sprouse and colleagues found when they asked a whole bunch of adults was exactly this for our four islands. This non-parallel lines is bigger, super additive interaction, right? And so they interpreted this to mean that therefore these adults have knowledge that dependencies crossing these island structures are strongly dispreferred. They don't like them. There's extra badness. So that's our adults. Now children. Okay, so in this case, de Villiers and colleagues actually measured child knowledge a slightly different way by their preferred interpretations. It's kind of hard to ask kids, hey, how much do you like this thing? Give me a number. Like, kids are not very good at this. So instead, you have to be a little bit more naturalistic when you try to get at their knowledge. So what de Villiers and colleagues asked in 2008 was, how do children prefer to interpret potentially ambiguous WH questions? Let me show you an example of this. Here we have a cat lying on the table next to a penguin. The cat has seen some better days, in need of fixing. Okay, let's talk about this situation. You might want to ask this. What did the boy fix the cat that was lying on the table with? And how do we interpret this? Okay, so think about it for a moment. What did the boy fix the cat that was lying on the table with? How can you interpret this? Well, one way is that you're answering with a needle and thread. What did he fix the cat with? Fix with what, right? And the cat that was lying on the table is like this additional information, but fix with what? A needle and thread is your answer. Okay. Versus the other type of dependency that is possible is the embedded one. What did the boy fix the cat that was lying on the table with? So it was the cat lying on the table with what? In this case, a penguin. That's what you're interpreting it as, right? So needle and thread versus a penguin as your potential interpretations. Children strongly prefer the needle and thread. They strongly disprefer the penguin, right? Lying on the table with what? And this corresponds to the wh dependencies that these interpretation relies on. So they strongly disprefer the wh dependency that is this one that crosses all of these different structures, right? In fact, crosses a complex NP. The cat is an NP, a noun phrase, and it's complex because it's got this embedded clause, right? So kids don't like this one. They prefer the other interpretation that doesn't cross this complex NP structure. So, okay, this is what we're looking for our behavioral targets. These judgment patterns, these preference patterns. Okay, so how long exactly do children have to learn in order to produce those target behaviors? And so data from de Villiers and colleagues found that at least the preference behavior from 4-year-olds, kids as young as 4. So we're going to say, okay, you have until you hit age 5. So just the end of age 4 is just shy of 60 months when you turn age 5. That's how long you get. Okay? And what input do children get to learn this? And this is what we can estimate from samples of child-directed speech, say from the child's database or wherever else we might like, right? So we estimate this to get a sense of what they're learning from. That's how long they have to learn. That's the behavior they're trying to produce. This is the syntactic islands acquisition problem that we're trying to solve. So this is where a theory of acquisition